sat down in '95 to write a movie that would push the CG art specifically for the company that I was the CEO of at the time, which was Digital Domain. Because Stan Winston and I founded that company to do exactly that. We wanted to do great CG characters and creatures. We had just done the Terminator 2. He had just done Jurassic Park. We saw what the future was. He had a number of Academy Awards at that point for the creatures and characters he designed using rubber and hydraulics and all that stuff. We saw the handwriting on the wall that this is where it was going. We founded that company. We quickly shot up to being probably the #2 effects company in the world, but we weren't doing the CG stuff. ILM was still far out ahead in that area. So I just wanted something that would give us a sort of an advantage, if you will, by pushing the team at DD to go farther. So that was going to be the movie I did after Titanic. So I figured they've got all of Titanic to figure this stuff out. That was my plan. So I shoot Titanic. And the world kind of changes for me, because when I come back, having done my first deep ocean expedition in the making of Titanic, I now just wanted to do that. And I also, at the same time, saw that we hadn't really pushed the art of CG, because that's really driven by projects. And if you don't have a project in the door to drive it, you're not going to do all the R&D necessary. So, my takeaway from it was, you got to have a CG project to improve the CG. And Avatar couldn't be that project, because if we tried it, we wouldn't be able to complete within the cycle of a single movie all of the stuff that we needed to do. There needed to be movies in between. So I looked at doing other movies. Nothing particularly excited me. I was more interested in the deep ocean stuff. But I knew CG wasn't going to stop advancing. All the other companies were going to continue to push, and all the other directors were going to continue to push those companies. So I knew it was only a matter of time before it became mature enough as an art that we could begin the Avatar process. And so, in the fullness of time, as the 3D theater screens were starting to roll out and people were accepting 3D, it started to look like the right timing was starting to converge in about 2005. So we were thinking at that point still doing Battle Angel. But we had some little script issues on Battle Angel, so I started looking for another project, and I remembered this thing I had written 10 years earlier. So I dug it out, and I went, I wonder if this is any damn good. And I sat in one sitting, read it, and said, it's pretty damn good. Now, I don't know if we're quite ready to make this movie, but this movie's good. So I brought it to John Landau's attention, who had produced Titanic with me. Yeah, right. And he said, I think we should do this movie. I think it'll be great. So we started down a process. We basically just said, fine, let's start. So we started down a process which ultimately took about 2 years, a little over 2 years, of, in parallel, designing everything. Every creature, every plant, every tree, the floating mountains, the whole 9 yards. And in parallel, designing our process for doing the performance capture. Now, interestingly, I didn't have to create the 3D camera because we were ready on that. We were good to go. The Fusion camera was ready. It was mature. We were ready to go. We did a few little added bells and whistles to it before we started shooting. But I wouldn't even need it for 2 years from that point, because we started shooting in late '07. So in this development of the process, we spent a lot of time we got our volume set up. We started figuring out how we were going to do it, and we went through a test shoot, which we called the prototype, to see if we could make, call it 30, 40 seconds of finished stuff, supposedly finished. In fact, it was only an approximation of the process that Weta would use. ILM actually did that test for us. But we were able to show the studio in 3D 40 seconds of the movie, with Neytiri and Jake Neytiri yelling at Jake and him sort of talking to her and her calling him a baby and all that sort of thing when they first meet. And, it looked very different. And later when we shot the film for real, that scene was at night and our test was in the daytime. And Neytiri was actually played by Yoon-Jin Kim, who's on Lost, right? I think she's still on Lost. Is Lost still on? I don't know. I don't follow television. Okay. Anyway, she was super cool. We had a lot of fun with Yoon-Jin. She just came in and just nailed it. Eventually I wound up giving the part to Zoe, and I absolutely love Zoe's performance and think she's amazing. But it taught us what we needed to know about how to make the movie. And it also showed Fox that we could do it. So, then then we just continued to develop our CG pipeline until we were fully cast and we were ready to go. So we actually started in I guess April of '07. So it was almost 2 years to the day from when we officially sort of pushed the button on the movie. So here I am on Titanic. Whole film didn't take 2 years. It took about 18 months, not including the expedition that we had done, a year earlier. So I'm thinking, man, this is a real marathon. This movie's huge. What the hell were we thinking?
Geek out a little bit about this movie and about what the technological aspects that helped you make it.
Well, you got two big things going on in this film. One is 3D, the other one is performance capture. And they're kind of unrelated subjects, except they're both in the same movie. Because you could do a 2D performance capture movie, or you can do a 3D film without performance capture, right? So let me talk about the 3D first. You got the Fusion camera system, which took us 7 years to develop before we started working on Avatar. And I developed it with Vince Pace, who is my technology partner on this thing, and we started in 2000, just basically kind of slapping two HD cameras together, and then it got more evolved, and we started to do active convergence and so on, and then we completely revolutionized internally our stuff, and we went from a parallel system to a beam splitter system, which, if you know how stereoscopic cameras work, you shoot into a beam splitter so that you can get an interocular distance between the two lenses that's less than the diameter of the lenses, because obviously the lenses just crash together and that's as close as you can get. But if you use a beam splitter, one kind of shoots this way and one shoots this way, and I'm geeking out now. That's okay. That's all right. Okay, so then the cameras move like this, and you can come right down to a 0 interocular distance. So interocular is the distance between your eyes, and the stereo space is determined by the distance between the two lenses. Because we actually can't move ours for obvious reasons, but when you're shooting a movie, when you're farther away, you want it to be bigger, and when you're closer, you want it to be smaller.
Now, in developing this camera, I mean, were there times where you come up with, you came up with the prototype and you developed it and you looked at it and you're like, that's close, we're not there yet, we got to wait until this is better?
Yeah, well, no, we kept working and refining, and then we'd take it out and we'd shoot a whole documentary with it, and then come back and have a whole wish list of improvements. And so we kept working in the sort of documentary cycles and shooting sports and stuff like that. Vince was always out on something like the NBA All-Star Game or something like that. And so the camera just got better and better until we started shooting Avatar.
But the 3D in this was totally different than the kind of gimmicky, hey, like the audience.
Yeah, we're not trying to throw, tennis balls bounced off your forehead through the whole movie. We're trying to create a window that draws you into a reality, and that's how I think the best 3D works. I also think, from a director's standpoint, I don't want to constantly be reminding you that you're sitting in a movie theater with a pair of glasses on watching a 3D film. I want you to be absorbed into the movie. So, we have a few gimmicky 3D shots throughout the movie, but like maybe 3 in a 2.5-hour movie. So it's really about creating a kind of a lucid experience of the reality of the film using stereo, because we see in depth all the time. We're sort of not really aware of it. We kind of forget that we're wearing perpetual 3D glasses. So the movie kind of works that way. You're just watching in 3D like you do real life, and guess what? It feels like real life.
Yeah, it really did. And let's talk a little bit about the motion capture and
right. So that's the whole other thing.
Yeah.
So the whole other piece.
You're doing 3D. Yeah. And you got to do this other thing.
Yeah. So and because of the nature of this film, with this alien clan, this alien culture, we had a choice. We could do it with makeup, like it's always been done. Rubber appliance makeup. It would have looked horrible, and it would have been boring and stupid, and kind of blue actors running around in the rainforest in their underwear, and a bunch of blue body paint. It would have looked terrible. And I wasn't interested in that. If I was going to do this, I wanted to do it this way, which is with performance capture. So if you know that, then you got to wait until the performance capture gets to a certain mature level to even start the movie, because there's no point starting it if it's still going to look like CG. And I started seeing things that looked like they were pretty damn good, like Gollum in Lord of the Rings films, and King Kong even. So I thought, all right, maybe it's time to start this. Do you want to ask them to chill, or are you okay sound-wise?
No, I'm good. I was just doing that. I'm good.
Okay, if you're good, I'm good. All right. So now cut to 2005, and we're starting this picture. But I felt that we had to still make a quantum leap forward in the way the facial performance was done, because we still weren't seeing kind of humanoid facial performance that looked looked real enough for me emotionally. And so we came up with the head rig. We call it the head rig. It's basically just a kind of helmet, very tight conformal kind of skull cap that's based on a life cast of the actor's head and a laser scan. So it fits very tightly and smoothly and comfortably. And then, there's a carbon fiber boom that comes out with a little camera on the front of it. And that camera shoots the face in a nulled out close-up. So even though the actor's moving all around, running, jumping, yelling, screaming, jumping off stuff, jumping over logs, running flat out, whatever, we're getting that facial performance absolutely locked off. And from that, you can extract everything, the eye movement, the lips, the tongue against the teeth, which is critical to the forming of certain sounds, phonemes and so on.
Yeah.
So, and that proved to exactly be the kind of holy grail approach to how to do CG faces, not the stuff that they had done before, which is what we call marker-based. We're now image-based. Because the marker-based system, you can't glue markers onto somebody's eyeballs, so how are you going to know how their eyes are moving around? Now you're making that up. So the more times that you introduce, that you give options to the animators for part of the performance that has to be made up through keyframe, the more chance you have of drifting away from what the actors actually did. So we tried to, in a way, we got the best animators in the world to take all this data that was coming out of our performance captures, and then we limited their options to things that were value added, like the ears and the tails. Because obviously the actors couldn't perform their animal-like ear movements and their animal-like tail movements while they were acting. So they took a human performance with no diminishment whatsoever, and then added to it. So when people ask me, sort of what percentage of the actor's performance came through in the final character, I say 110%, because you actually had an increase in the sense of whatever the emotionality of the moment was. If somebody felt bad, their ears were kind of submissive like a dog's. If they were angry, their tail would lash back and forth like an angry lion.
This idea of the uncanny valley, where something's off, and you can't really put your finger on it. The more something. And here, do you believe in that? And do you think that this movie just kind of kills that?
I believe in the Uncanny Valley as a principle that as you approach human, let's say this is an absolute human, and this is a kind of a talking moose. As you approach human, our attraction to the character goes down, and then at the last second, just when you get to a true human look, it goes back up. Well, we needed to get on the far side of that dip in the response curve, which is called the Uncanny Valley, and we needed to get to the opposite side where we don't have to necessarily believe that it's 100% photoreal, and we don't have to necessarily believe that they actually exist, but we have to believe in them as emotional creatures. I think we've absolutely accomplished that. And I think a lot of the shots are photoreal. Maybe not every one, but we had 2,500 shots in the film. We knew that we had to hit a certain batting average.
I don't know. As an artist, do you go look at your older films and say, I wish we had this for Terminator?
Well, look at Aliens. Look at how cool the alien queen would be. She would be. You just had to shoot it differently then. So maybe a style was created that was a sort of a function of its time. And every movie is a cross-section of what was technically possible in its time, sometimes overcoming those limitations and being more furtive with the lighting and having to puppet things and pour a lot of slime on them and just see the glistens in the dark created a stylized look that maybe you wouldn't do if you could just see it. On Avatar, I thought the creatures looked so good. I said, have them jump right out into the sunlight. I don't care. That thing holds up. The Thanator, you see him in broad daylight right in front of you, and you go, holy shit, he's real. So, stylistically, if we hadn't had that, we would have done it very differently. So, it's funny. They were doing a retrospective in London of my stuff, and I had a clip from each one of my movies, starting with Terminator, and I just watched them, and they just slowly evolved and got, in a funny way better, but I don't think it made the movies better. And the other thing is that the audience is watching those movies in their time. You know what I mean? So they only have a reference point that is the technology of its time. And I don't think, if Terminator hadn't existed and you released that exact movie today, people would laugh at it. They would laugh at it. No, come on. They would go, what the hell? It just wouldn't hold up. It would look cheesy, But in its time, it had great impact.
So then what do you think? When I think of the future, in your mind, what is the future of cinema? What are movie houses or movies going to look like 15 years from now?
I think, the interesting thing is I think we've been on this steady slope of progress, and I think it's starting to plateau out, meaning we're actually getting to the point where we can already almost do everything we need to do. And the last holy grail thing to do was human, accurate, photoreal, emotionally correct performance capture. We can do it now. We probably could have done humans easier than Na'vi, because human skin is easier to light. It looks more familiar to us, the way it takes the light. We had to come up with a whole different color scheme in order to be able to light the Na'vi. We filled them with green light. You would never do that with a human face, because we needed a color difference between the key and the fill side. So we had to come up with a whole different color scheme to even light blue skin. Lighting blue skin is difficult. Lighting human skin, we know how to do. We've been doing it for 100 years, you know. So I actually think we could do humans easier than Na'vi at this point. You know, and with absolute photoreality that you couldn't tell from the real thing. The question is, why would you do that? You don't gain much by doing it. It's expensive, and if you have an actor, just shoot the actor. You know, unless there's something very specific that you want to do, like have an actor, you know, much younger than they really are, or much older than they really are, or some other sort of transformative thing that would normally be done by makeup. But young makeup doesn't work. You can do old makeup, but you can't. Young makeup is tricky. You can make somebody maybe 10 years younger if you're really careful about it and you don't punch in too tight, or you can make them 50 years older, or 80 years older. You know what I mean? But it tends not to work the other way. So let's say, I use this example, I think it's apt. I've never talked to Clint Eastwood about this. I don't even know him. But if you wanted to play Dirty Harry, just as an example, how cool would that be to see another Dirty Harry movie? Just a straight up Dirty Harry movie, you know, just shooting the bad guys, just like he did it in 1975 or whenever it was. He could do it, and it would be him, you know, it would be legitimate. He'd be driving it. But bringing Marilyn Monroe back from the dead, I think, is wrong. I think that's not how it should be used. But your general question about where movies are going, I think they can be brighter. I think we can experiment with higher frame rates to get them clearer, so there's no stroboscopic artifacts whatsoever, which is really important in 3D. I think there's going to be a lot more 3D. A lot more filmmakers are going to use 3D. I think 3D might even become the way movies are made, in the same way that we now make all our movies in color. But there was a transitional period of 20 or so years where some were still in black and white, some were still in color, and you know they were sort of considered on a case-by-case basis. Then color television came along, and wham, every movie had to be in color, or you couldn't play it on TV afterwards. You see what I mean? Yeah. It was just boom, that's it. There are no more black and white films. In fact, you had to get permission. You had to be a highly respected artist, and you had to get permission to make a movie not in color, which is the exact opposite of when color started out. You see what I mean? I think 3D could be exactly the same. I think people will experiment with it. Some movies will be in 3D, some won't for a while, and then all of a sudden everybody will be watching, you know, their sports in their home on a huge plasma screen in 60 frame per second 3D, and you know, movies are going to have to. They can't be outcompeted by what people are getting in the home. So they're going to have to step up and up their game to match that. It'll probably be the same pattern.
Can you guys work on next on losing the glasses, or would that be just part of it?
For a big theatrical exhibition like in a movie theater, you're always going to wear glasses. But for small devices, for laptops, and even for home screens, they'll use autostereoscopic systems where you don't have to wear the glasses. For right now, your home viewing will be with glasses. But there's no. I've seen laptops that work beautifully, you know, without glasses. So that's all possible.
When you were making this movie and you were developing and you were writing, were you working with biologists and scientists to come up with like I know it's science fiction, but keep things developed so they look real. They have like a biology.
Yeah. Well, our creature design team, you know, the tables would be covered by books of animal biology and animal anatomy and photo books with the textures of, you know, everything from the back of a tortoise to part of the interaction between the bill, the beak, and the skin of a hornbill, to poison dart frogs, to tropical fish and nudibranchs, and you know, sometimes very small creatures would be blown up very large, not literally the creature but the textures of it. So we were going back to nature the whole time and using nature's resourcefulness and imagination to fuel what we were doing, which is why the creatures feel real, you know. And in parallel with that, the animators were working out, you know, how do they move? How do their muscle systems move? How does a six-legged dog move? You know, how does a six-legged horse run? And of course, it's not really a horse. It's an alien animal that resembles a horse in its gestural broad strokes, but it's a nectar-feeding, six-legged, herbivore that's vaguely horse-like, but happens to be about the size of a stegosaurus.
I want you to do a documentary on the wildlife of Pandora.
We should do a Discovery Channel documentary on Pandora. We have a 380-page document called Pandorapedia that was fed into by, an astrophysicist, an ethnomusicologist, an anthropologist, a botanist, and a bunch of other ists that created this document. It's fully fleshed out and extremely detailed. So, hell yeah, we got it all. We're ready to do it.
All right.